An emotional day as family members confronted the drunk driver who caused a tragic crash.
Our family has been brutally damaged with the loss of a major patriarch.
83-year-old Milton Harris lost his life on that tragic day last year. 13 Wham's Carla Rogner was in court this afternoon as his family shared the impact of their father's death. Carla?
Yeah, that's right. In court, Justin Seabon pleaded guilty to felony driving while intoxicated, vehicular homicide, and driving without a license.
He's the hardest working man we know.
Milton Harris is remembered by his family as a pillar of the community, an integral member of the civil rights movement, and someone who was always ready to help a neighbor.
We all have learned the work ethic, and all of our kids are also very, very good workers. So we learned that from our father, and that legacy still lives on with us and our children.
Monday afternoon, several of Harris's 8 children packed into a courtroom to face the man who killed their father. 33-year-old Justin Seabon was driving drunk when he crashed into Harris's parked car on Genesee Park Boulevard last May. Seabon said he had been drinking through the Mother's Day weekend, grieving his own mother, before he got behind the wheel to go to his girlfriend's house. In court, Seabon broke down saying, "I lost control," repeatedly saying, "I'm sorry." At one point, 2 of Harris's children embraced Seabon and told him they forgive him.
Because that's the Christian thing to do, that's how we was raised. And that's what the Bible says. If I don't forgive him, he won't forgive us.
And yes, he was very remorseful in the courtroom. I sympathize with the agony that he's been going through. He said he hasn't slept since it happened. That's a lot of turmoil, but I hope he can turn that turmoil around.
The judge and attorneys in the case agree they've never seen such compassion in a courtroom.
Obviously, we have a very well-educated and loving family of the victim.
For the Harris family, forgiving Seabon in court was a step in their healing process. They say they hope their father's death can serve as an example to others and help prevent drunk driving. And a judge sentenced Seabon to serve between 4 and 12 years in state prison. Seabon says he's already begun to deal with his alcoholism. The Harris family says they plan to attend his parole hearings.
Tonight, a Rochester family is grieving, as is their neighborhood and people all across our community.
They are remembering a man, 83 years old, who meant so much to so many. Milton Harris was sitting in his car on Genesee Park Boulevard yesterday afternoon when police say a drunk driver did this.
He was still working in his side businesses, and he was cutting the lawn. This drunk driver just mangled my dad's car and killed him, and it's just heart-wrenching.
We've lost our patriarch. The Southwest community has lost a patriarch.
And they lost a good man.
A lady called me this morning. He took her garbage out every Thursday. Every Thursday for years, he'd take her garbage out, and he's going to be missed.
Milton Harris came to Rochester from Alabama in the 1950s and has been a blessing to our community ever since, raising 8 children with wife Ruby in a 3-bedroom home in the 19th Ward, modeling for those kids service to others, love of family, and good old hard work.
He worked at Bosch & Lomb until he retired. My mother worked at Kodak till she retired. Then while working at Bosch & Lomb, he was also working Bethlehem Steel, and he also worked at Cover Pool on the weekend. So he's a man that always had 2 to 3 jobs.
His family says when he didn't know something, Milton would find a book or use trial and error. And he passed on what he learned, both the practical and the profound.
The education he had, you could never find in the schools. He had an education that was far more.
It's been only a day since they lost him. Already, his family is finding comfort in Milton's words.
The golden rule: treat others the way you want to be treated, with respect. And also, don't forget to say, "I love you."
And they know he did love them. Milton had 64 grand or great-grandchildren. We learned tonight that he would call his entire family every weekend. That's 70 to 100 phone calls just to check in. And by the way, the family says they are praying tonight for 25-year-old Justin Seabon, the previous DWI offender now charged with DWI again and vehicular homicide in Milton Harris's death.
We are learning more today about the student accused of bringing a loaded gun with ammunition to Red Jacket High School last Friday. The 15-year-old student remains in custody. He's facing 2 felonies: criminal possession of a firearm on school grounds and intent to unlawfully use a firearm against another. And as Jenny Ryan found out, the student's behavior had been a concern, and some staff members say they feared something like this could happen.
Inside his office at Red Jacket High School, Principal Mark Bracey spoke to the student armed with a gun for 2.5 hours. The sheriff and DA credit Bracey with staying calm, physically disarming the student and averting a tragedy.
The contact with the school staff was extraordinary. We can't say enough. And the eventual result of this, I'm sure, prevented what could have been a serious situation.
The sheriff's office said the student had a plan, but did not elaborate. One of the 2 charges he is facing does reflect that. Some staff members at the high school tell 13 WHAM the student's behavior had been a concern since the beginning of the year. One staff member says the student had 12 behavioral incidents and was suspended from school a total of 13 days. They describe his behavior as disruptive and menacing and say they share their concerns about his placement in the high school with administrators. I asked DA Jim Ritz about the student's mental health on Friday.
When a 15-year-old comes to school with a loaded gun, we have to assume that there's some sort of issue there, and determining what that is and making sure we're addressing it is, one of the things we really have to work on at this point.
The sheriff says the student was on a plan that required him to check in with Principal Bracey. That's how Friday's incident began. 2.5 tense-filled hours, a student, a loaded gun, and the principal. 13 WHAM has also learned that the concerns of staff members that we heard from were shared in a meeting today between local teachers union representatives and those from the state union. The DA told me today it's unlikely that the student accused will return to school this year. Meanwhile, they continue to investigate how and where that student got a gun and ammunition and brought it to school.